Imagine standing on the highest mountain on Earth, surrounded by people from every corner of the world, guides, clients, cameras, fixed ropes stretching upward like a highway in the sky. From a distance, Everest looks crowded, almost civilized. And yet, more often than anyone wants to admit, it becomes one of the loneliest places a human can experience. High on the mountain, help can be just a few steps away and still be completely unreachable. This is the Everest Rescue Paradox, a place where proximity does not equal safety, where being seen does not mean being saved, and where dozens of capable climbers can pass a single struggling person without stopping. Not because they are cruel, but because the mountain quietly removes their ability to choose otherwise.
Tonight on Ben Stories, we're not here to judge climbers or glorify tragedy. We're here to understand the uncomfortable reality behind one haunting question.
How can people die on Everest while surrounded by help? To answer that, we have to strip away the myths, look past the summit photos, and confront what really happens when human limits collide with extreme altitude. Let's begin where the illusion starts, among the crowds themselves. From afar, the upper slopes of Everest resemble a slow-moving procession. Lines of climbers clip into fixed ropes, inching forward step by step, their headlamps glowing before dawn like a chain of stars. Photos from these moments often spark outrage online. Too many people, too commercial, too dangerous. The assumption is simple. If there are this many climbers on the route, help must be everywhere. That assumption collapses the moment you understand where those climbers actually are. Above 8,000 meters, the death zone isn't just a dramatic label, it's a physiological boundary. Oxygen levels drop so low that the human body can no longer maintain itself. Cells begin to starve, muscles weaken, judgment narrows. The body, quite literally, starts prioritizing survival minute by minute. In this environment, being close to others does not create a safety net. It creates competition for time, oxygen, and energy. Crowds on Everest don't move freely. They move within tight weather windows that may last only a few hours. In recent seasons, including 2026, permit caps were introduced with the intention of reducing congestion. On paper, fewer climbers should mean safer conditions. In reality, the opposite pressure emerged. With limited permits and narrow summit windows, climbers were funneled into the same small blocks of time. Everyone pushed upward together, because waiting often meant failing altogether. This creates what looks like proximity, but functions like isolation. Each climber is operating inside a personal biological budget. Oxygen is finite, strength is finite, decision-making capacity is finite. Stopping for even a short time, whether to help, assess, or wait, can be the difference between making it down or not. And the mountain does not offer refunds for good intentions. The illusion deepens when we imagine that a struggling climber can simply be picked up by those around them. At sea level, that idea feels reasonable. On Everest, it borders on impossible. At extreme altitude, even lifting your own pack can feel overwhelming. Assisting another person, especially one who is no longer moving efficiently, multiplies the effort required. Rescue is not a single action, it is a chain of actions. Stabilizing, communicating, repositioning, coordinating, descending. Each link demands clarity, strength, and time resources that are already depleted. And in the death zone, time is not neutral. Every extra minute spent stationary increases cold exposure, oxygen consumption, and mental fatigue for everyone involved. This is why crowded routes don't translate into rapid response. Most climbers you see are already operating near their personal limits. They are not idle witnesses. They are participants in a delicate balance, where even small disruptions can cascade into catastrophe. There's also a misconception that professional guides or rescue teams are always nearby, ready to intervene. In reality, guides are responsible for their own clients, often spread out across the route. High-altitude rescues require coordination far beyond what's visible on the mountain. Helicopters, for example, are often imagined as a last-minute solution. But above certain altitudes, physics intervenes. Thin air reduces lift. Hovering becomes unstable. In many cases, aerial rescue simply isn't an option. So what you're left with is a crowded mountain, where everyone appears close, but functionally, everyone is alone. This is the cruel contradiction of Everest. The mountain doesn't care how many people are on it. It responds only to altitude, weather, and human biology. And in that environment, proximity becomes an illusion, a comforting idea that disappears the moment someone slows down. Understanding this illusion is the first step toward understanding the paradox itself. Because once help stops being guaranteed, the question changes. It's no longer, why didn't someone help? It becomes, what does help even mean at this altitude? And that leads us directly into the next reality climbers face: the hard limits of physics and logistics, where even the will to help runs into walls no human effort can break. If the illusion of proximity is the first thing Everest takes away, the next is the belief that effort alone can solve any problem. On the mountain, good intentions eventually collide with physics, and physics always wins. At extreme altitude, rescue is not limited by courage or teamwork. It is limited by mechanics. Every kilogram matters. Every step demands oxygen. Every pause drains strength that may never return. To move a non-responsive climber, even a short distance downward, requires a coordinated effort that most people never see. In ideal conditions, it can take 6 to 8 climbers working together, rotating positions, managing ropes, stabilizing footing, and synchronizing movement. Each of those rescuers must sacrifice their own progress and, more critically, their own oxygen supply. And unlike time or money, oxygen cannot be borrowed back. This is where the mountain's math becomes unforgiving. A single climber at altitude is already consuming oxygen at an accelerated rate. Add physical exertion, hauling weight, bracing against gravity, and that rate spikes. Now multiply that cost across several rescuers. What looks like a collective effort from the outside quickly becomes a shared risk, where helping one person may push several others past their safe threshold. In recent seasons, including 2026, this calculus became even harsher. Permit limits reduced overall numbers, but they also intensified the exhaustion factor. With fewer climbers spread across the same terrain, there were fewer spare bodies available when something went wrong. Rescue didn't fail because people refused to help. It failed because the margin for error had vanished. Then there's the issue of altitude itself. Above certain elevations, the human body loses its ability to recover. At sea level, rest restores strength. On Everest, rest can accelerate decline. Standing still in thin air allows hypoxia to deepen, cold to settle, and cognitive clarity to fade. In rescue scenarios, this creates a brutal paradox. Stopping to help may actually worsen the situation for everyone involved. Technology, often seen as the solution, offers limited relief. Helicopters are constrained by air density and wind. Their operational ceiling is not a guideline, it's a hard boundary imposed by physics. Even when conditions allow a high-altitude approach, hovering safely near steep terrain is extraordinarily risky. One miscalculation affects not just the climber in distress, but the crew attempting the rescue. Ground-based support faces similar constraints. Fixed ropes are designed for upward and downward movement by individuals, not for hauling incapacitated weight over long distances. Anchors, ice conditions, and slope angles all limit what's possible. The mountain does not adapt to emergencies. It remains indifferent. Logistics compound these challenges. Communication at altitude is fragmented. Radios fail. Batteries drain faster in cold. Messages relayed through multiple camps lose clarity. Decisions must be made quickly, often with incomplete information. By the time a coordinated response forms, the window for meaningful action may already be closing. What makes this reality so difficult to accept is that it contradicts how we understand rescue in everyday life. We expect systems, protocols, backup plans. On Everest, those structures exist only up to a point. Beyond that, survival depends on individual capacity in a place that systematically reduces it. This doesn't mean rescues never happen. They do. But when they succeed, it's often because conditions briefly align, weather holds, strength remains, and timing cooperates. These moments are exceptions, not guaranteed. The mountain exposes a truth that's uncomfortable to confront. There are situations where no amount of experience, funding, or preparation can overcome environmental limits. On Everest, rescue is not a moral failure when it doesn't happen. It's a physical impossibility when the costs exceed what human bodies can pay. And yet, despite knowing this, climbers continue upward, not blindly but under pressures that are as psychological as they are physical. To understand why, we have to move beyond logistics and examine the ethical terrain. The invisible forces that shape decisions when turning back feels more costly than moving forward. That ethical terrain begins where survival instincts quietly replace social contracts. High on Everest, ethics don't disappear, but they change shape. In everyday life, helping someone in distress is a social reflex. It's reinforced by law, culture, and shared expectation. On the mountain, especially above 8,000 meters, those expectations begin to erode, not because climbers stop caring, but because survival instincts move to the foreground. This transition is subtle and often invisible to the person experiencing it. Climbers refer to this stretch as the passing zone, a place where you are physically close to others, yet psychologically sealed inside your own struggle. Every step becomes deliberate. Every breath is counted. The brain, starved of oxygen, prioritizes immediate survival cues and suppresses broader moral reasoning. Decisions narrow. Time compresses. By 2026, new pressures intensified this ethical strain. Permit caps raised the financial and emotional stakes of each attempt. Many climbers invested more than ever before, years of preparation, limited slots, significant expense. Psychologists call this the sunk cost effect. The more you've invested, the harder it becomes to walk away, even when conditions deteriorate. On Everest, that bias doesn't just influence summit decisions. It affects whether a climber feels capable of stopping at all. Stopping, in this context, isn't neutral. It risks falling behind the weather window. It risks losing fixed rope access. It risks using oxygen that was calculated to last only for a specific timeline. Helping someone means rewriting that entire plan in an environment where improvisation is punished. Expedition leaders face an even more complex dilemma. They are responsible not just for individuals, but for groups. In recent years, insurance frameworks have shifted to reflect the realities of high-altitude risk. Rescue decisions now carry legal and financial implications that extend beyond the mountain. Attempting a high-risk rescue can endanger the remaining clients, void insurance protections, or expose teams to liability if outcomes worsen. This creates a cold-sounding but real calculation. Does attempting a rescue increase the overall risk profile of the group beyond an acceptable threshold? On Everest, leaders are forced to make decisions where there are no good outcomes, only varying degrees of loss. What's often misunderstood is that these choices are rarely dramatic or explicit. No one announces a moral decision. It happens quietly. A climber hesitates. Another looks at their oxygen gauge. Someone checks the time. The moment passes. Movement resumes. From the outside, this can look like indifference. From the inside, it feels like inevitability. There's also the role of normalization. Over decades, Everest has accumulated a shared understanding of what is possible and what is not. Climbers are briefed extensively before they ever step on the mountain. They are told plainly that above certain altitudes, rescue may not be feasible. This knowledge doesn't make the reality easier, but it reframes expectations. When a crisis unfolds, it does so within a context where limitations are already acknowledged. Ethics on Everest are not abandoned, they are constrained. The mountain compresses moral choice into a narrow corridor, defined by oxygen, weather, and strength. Outside that corridor, intention no longer matters. And then there is the most unsettling factor of all. The mind itself begins to fail. As altitude increases, cognition degrades. Judgment blurs. Empathy dulls. Not from malice, but from biology. Hypoxia interferes with emotional processing, making urgency feel distant, abstract. Climbers may recognize that something is wrong, yet feel strangely disconnected from the need to act. This cognitive collapse doesn't announce itself. It masquerades as calm, as focus, as determination. And it often convinces climbers that they are still thinking clearly, long after they are not. To understand why help sometimes doesn't happen, we have to accept that ethics on Everest are filtered through a compromised brain, operating under extreme pressure in an environment that punishes delay. The question isn't whether climbers care, it's whether they are still capable of caring in the way we expect. That leads us to the final internal barrier, the silent unraveling of the human mind at altitude, where recognition, emotion, and action slowly fall out of sync. By the time climbers reach the upper slopes of Everest, the most dangerous changes are often the least visible. Muscles weaken. Coordination slips. But it's the mind that quietly becomes unreliable. At extreme altitude, the brain operates under sustained oxygen deprivation. One of the most serious consequences is high-altitude cerebral edema, a condition where swelling disrupts normal cognitive function. In its early stages, it doesn't announce itself as panic or pain. It shows up as confusion, delayed responses, and a subtle loss of judgment. Teammates may still recognize one another, but emotional connection begins to fade. This is where the rescue paradox becomes deeply human. Climbers may intellectually understand that someone nearby needs help, yet lack the emotional urgency to respond. Hypoxia dampens empathy. It reduces the brain's ability to prioritize anything beyond immediate self-preservation. What remains is a narrow focus on movement, breathing, and staying upright. The wider moral picture slips out of view. This mental narrowing fuels what's often called summit fever. It's not simply obsession with the top. It's a cognitive tunnel where the goal feels like the only remaining structure holding everything together. Turning back can feel more dangerous than continuing, even when logic suggests otherwise. By the time climbers realize they are in trouble, they may already be past the point where reversal is possible. The tragedy is that this collapse rarely feels dramatic. It feels quiet. A sense of emotional flatness sets in. Decisions lose weight. Warnings register intellectually but fail to trigger action. In these moments, climbers aren't choosing to ignore others. Their brains are no longer capable of responding as they would at lower altitude. Surrounding climbers are often experiencing the same degradation simultaneously. A crowded route can be filled with individuals who all appear functional, yet are operating with reduced awareness and blunted emotion. The result is collective inaction, not from coordination, but from shared impairment. Looking ahead, the future of Everest may intensify this paradox rather than resolve it. Environmental changes are altering the mountain's surface. Long frozen landmarks are becoming more exposed, serving as stark, unintentional markers of risk. At the same time, technology is advancing. Remote-monitored biometrics, heart rate, oxygen saturation, movement are increasingly used by expeditions to track climbers in real time. Supporters argue that data saves lives by identifying trouble earlier. Critics counter that it may only document decline without providing a means to intervene. Numbers don't move bodies. Alerts don't create oxygen. In an environment where response options are limited, information alone may not change outcomes. Everest has become a premium commercial product, shaped by logistics, regulation, and global demand. With that transformation comes an uncomfortable truth. As long as access is monetized and success is measured by summits, the mountain will continue to extract a human cost. Not because people are careless, but because the environment amplifies every weakness in the system. The rescue paradox persists because it's rooted in biology, not policy. You can cap permits, improve forecasting, refine gear. But once climbers enter the death zone, the rules revert to physiology and physics. Which brings us to the final question. Not about Everest, but about us. What does this mountain ultimately teach us about ambition, limits, and the stories we tell ourselves about control? To answer that, we have to step back from the climb and reflect on the lesson that remains when the mountain has finished speaking. Everest is often described as a test of endurance, skill, and willpower. But beneath the headlines and summit photos, it is something far more unsettling. It is a mirror, one that strips away comfort, certainty, and moral simplicity, and shows us what happens when human ambition collides with absolute limits. The rescue paradox forces us to confront a truth we don't like to admit. There are environments where being surrounded by others does not mean you are safe, and where help cannot always take the form we expect. On Everest, proximity is not protection. Technology is not control. And good intentions are not enough to overcome biology. This doesn't make climbers heartless. It makes them human, operating at the edge of what the body and mind can tolerate. The mountain doesn't judge these decisions, and neither should we. What it offers instead is a lesson in humility, a reminder that nature does not negotiate and that some risks cannot be insured, regulated, or rescued away. Perhaps the most important takeaway isn't about Everest at all, but about how we define success. In a world that celebrates achievement at any cost, the mountain quietly suggests a different metric, one rooted not in reaching the highest point, but in recognizing when to turn back. Because on Everest, reaching the summit is optional. Coming back alive is not. If stories like this matter to you, stories that look beyond the summit and into the human consequences of extreme places,